In Tennessee, the Democrat Mr. Albert Gore picked up the seat left by the former Republican leader, Senator Howard Baker. But in Kentucky, the Republican Mr. Mitch McConnell narrowly beat the Democrat Senator Walter Huddleston. So President Reagan has romped home despite the dislike of liberal intellectuals in both the United States and Britain. He is, very simply, very popular.
Thank you. I think that's just been arranged.
Good morning from New York. President Reagan has swept America. He's back in the White House for 4 more years. It's a victory for the politics of sunshine, though he hasn't taken many more Republicans back with him to Washington.
Reagan certainly seems to have captured the imagination of the American voters. What do you think is the secret of his appeal?
He was a member of the Screen Actors Guild.
I voted for the successful candidate.
Why did you do that?
Because I have great confidence in his ability to keep this world on an even keel.
Is he a friend of yours, President Reagan?
Yes.
The United States has just woken to 4 more years of President Reagan, to one of the most stunning election victories of all time, and to the realization of the changed country it has become. Changes that many people in Britain and in Europe have not begun to understand.
American friends of mine tell me, and people quite high up in the administration and in the American civil service, as well as commentators, that the president's desire is to be a sort of constitutional monarch, to be a peacemaker, a pacemaker in international affairs. Now, if his intentions are very seriously along those lines, and if he will afford access to the Soviet Union and will deal as a superpower that wants to produce a path for peace, I think he could be quite successful, and that'd be good news for America, and of course it would be good news for Britain, as much of the rest of the world. I think that may be what he wants to do. I only hope that he's got the forcefulness and appoints the right people to his administration to take it through.
Now, if Labour win the next election, you could be working with President Reagan as British Prime Minister. How easy would that be for you?
Oh, not difficult at all. The thing about President Reagan, I've had a meeting with him, is that you can afford to talk very directly, adult to adult. And that always helps, of course, even if there are areas in which there are disagreements.
Well, it's a good thing for Britain in that he's obviously a good friend of Britain, and he gets on well with our Prime Minister. There's a very good relationship there. And he's obviously going to be confident it's going to be a strong government, although he'll still have some problems in the Congress.
What sort of economic policies should we expect, and how will they affect Britain?
He's put the base of the American economy on a far higher level than it would otherwise be. And if for any reason there's some world recession that takes place in the next few years, the Americans start at a much higher level with a lot of new industry, a lot of new technology, and he's remarkably lifted that. And it's been rather amusing to me that you've had all these critics around the world saying how dreadful this man doing all this, when in fact this man has brought very real growth, an enormous drop in unemployment to the United States.
Is there a lesson perhaps for this government? I
think there's certainly the lesson for all governments that you've got to be in a situation where you get expansion. If you don't get expansion, you get an ever-increasing, funnily enough, tax burden.
He has now the authority of a president who has got overwhelming support. I hope he'll use it for the peace of the world and for the general economic stability and prosperity around the world. Will he? I don't know. I hope so. I think there is little doubt that he would not have shifted his position over the Soviet Union and the importance of arms control had it not been for the fact that he had to have an election. This is the advantage of elections. It does concentrate the mind of presidents and prime ministers. Having concentrated his mind, having switched his position, I think he'll stick with it. So if I had to predict, I think they'll get back into talks with the Soviet Union next year, and I think you might even see the first rather preliminary partial agreement in 1986.
I think it's a very considerable personal triumph for Ronald Reagan. I say that because, of course, the Democratic Party has done really quite well in the associated congressional elections in both houses, better than expected. So I think this is very much a Ronald Reagan triumph rather than a Republican Party triumph.
A good or a bad thing for Britain on balance?
Well, it depends on your prejudices. I mean, I think it's, on balance, a bad thing. I would rather have seen a Democratic president, both for economic reasons and for world political reasons, particularly the third world questions and the issues of East-West relations. But it's not to be, and I think it's possible to speculate that President Reagan in second term may be a much more acceptable international president than he was in his first term.
What's your reaction to this landslide victory?
Well, very great disappointment. I think Mr. Mondale would have been the right president of the United States and would have been the right president for the world, so to speak, producing the influence out of America that the world very much needs. But also an ideological disappointment. America has chosen the president who says that everything's all right, and it's rejected the candidate who says that with the poor getting poorer in America, with problems in the cities, changes have to be made, and the Americans have turned their back on the idea of radical change.
Mr. Reagan has taken 49 of the 50 states. Only Minnesota, the home of the beaten Democrat, Mr. Walter Mondale, has stood out against him, and of course the District of Columbia with its overwhelming black majority. They all had their say afterwards, and some had their excuses.
Thank you. I think that's just been arranged.
I thank the people of America for hearing my case.
American women will never again be second-class citizens.
President Reagan, the oldest president in American history, has won with the overwhelming vote of the young. Mr. Mondale, virtually a no-hoper from the start, led the Democratic Party to its fourth defeat in 5 presidential elections. And Mrs. Geraldine Ferraro, the first woman on the ticket of a major American party, was told crushingly by the electorate that she had made no difference. She even lost her own home state, New York. Well, they all had a busy, though not an unexpected, evening.
The subterranean ballroom of a Los Angeles hotel was to be the centerpiece for the flag-waving Republican rejoicing for Ronald Reagan. Whilst the rejoicing downstairs was reaching fever pitch, the administration was facing its first post-election foreign crisis. White House spokesman Larry Speakes confirmed a Soviet freighter was approaching Nicaragua. He claimed it was carrying warplanes. He would not discuss it now, but about the campaign, he was candid.
Well, let's be honest, there must have been a low moment. Surely now we can admit it.
The low moment has got to be after that first debate when so many people were beginning to say that the president might have a problem in his re-election. It took us about 3 days to see that there was no problem and that we were still gaining in our numbers.
White House Chief of Staff James Baker is viewed as one of the architects of Reagan's victory.
Well, I'm not prepared to take a lot. There were an awful lot of people who contributed a whole lot to this. The person that deserves the credit, quite frankly, is the president.
Mr. Reagan himself still wasn't going to accept his massive win publicly until all the polls had closed. His 75-year-old brother Neil was amongst those waiting. I'd asked him earlier, why did he think his brother was happy to go on?
I think probably the reason he's doing it is that, number one, he's not awestruck by the job. And number two, every morning when he wakes up, he's not awestruck by himself.
With all the polls finally closed, the Republican climax had come. They were ecstatic. But his landslide victory produced no new promises. The folksy one-liners that had been his campaign trademark remained the order.
Seems we did this 4 years ago, and let me just say, well, you know, good habits are hard to break. Just a short time ago, Walter Mondale phoned me, and he'd concede. No, and he told me that He told me the people had made their decision, and therefore we were all Americans. We'd go forward together. To each one of you I say, tonight is the end of nothing. It's the beginning of everything. I'm gonna do it just one more time. You ain't seen nothing yet.
So Ronald Reagan has done what the flag waving, the patriotism, the campaigning said he would do. He's won 4 more years in the White House with a massive mandate. And in doing so has said at least as much about the mood in America today as about the character of the man who's captured it. Jon Snow, ITN, with President Reagan in Los Angeles.
It had been a humiliating defeat, a night in which Walter Mondale could find little comfort. Now it was time to bring himself into the fold of that one small group of Americans who had found themselves able to support him. They gave him the warmth of their welcome, and he brought the dignity of a man determined to show that he could lose with good grace. With him came his wife Joan and their 3 children. Mr. Mondale and his family were clearly moved by the reception their home state gave them. He had campaigned for 22 long months, but except for one short period after the first televised debate with Ronald Reagan, he had never managed to match his opponent in the polls. Political historians will judge the quality of the fight he fought and the reasons for the enormity of his defeat. But tonight there were people here who wanted to affirm that he had not let them down.
A few minutes ago, I called the President of the United States and congratulated him on his victory for re-election as President of the United States. Please. He has won. We are all Americans. He is our President, and we honor him tonight. Tonight, we rejoice in our democracy. We rejoice in the freedom of a wonderful people, and we accept their verdict. I thank the people of America for hearing my case. And I thank Geraldine Ferraro. We're very proud of Jerry. We're very proud of Jerry. We didn't win, but we made history, and that fight has just begun. I am confident that history will judge us honorably. So tonight, let us be determined to fight on. Good night, and God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
After 24 years in politics, Mr. Mondale faces an uncertain future. He had led the Democratic Party to one of their biggest ever disasters, and any sort of political comeback may well be beyond his reach. Norman Reese, ITN, in St. Paul's, Minnesota.
Geraldine Ferraro must have known the campaign was lost by the time she got to the party at the New York Hilton. She put a brave face on it as she sat with her husband and family watching the returns on television. But as the returns got worse, so the tension began to show. In spite of a half-hearted attempt to live it up in the ballroom below, the Democrat notables of New York were more holding a wake than having a celebration. But it all changed when Jerry arrived to concede and get consolation, that first kiss from veteran Senator Moynihan. Then her final address and her justification for standing for vice president at all.
For 2 centuries, candidates have run for president. Not one from a major party ever asked a woman to be his running mate until Walter Mondale. He opened a door which will never be closed again. That is a victory of which every American can be proud. Campaigns, even if you lose them, do serve a purpose. My candidacy has said the days of discrimination are numbered. American women will never again be second-class citizens.
I asked New York's mayor if he thought it had been wise to have Mrs. Ferraro on the ticket.
Listen, if you lose, you can critique the campaign. I'm not going to do that tonight. I think that Jerry Ferraro ran a superb campaign for us, presented the issues. She knocked down a barrier that had existed against women as national candidates with the major parties at the top of the ticket. She is to be given a great deal of credit for having performed superbly. Nevertheless, tonight is a sad night.
When she was chosen as Walter Mondale's running mate, Jerry Ferraro said there's no longer a sign outside the White House which says only white males need apply. Well, the sign may have gone, but Jerry Ferraro is going to have to apply again.
So President Reagan has won 525 electoral votes, a record. It even beats Franklin Roosevelt. 4 years ago, he had 489. Mr. Mondale has just 13 electoral votes, the lowest for a major party candidate since 1936. 4 years ago, the Democrat President Carter had 49. So today, only lonely Minnesota and the District of Columbia have opted out of Mr. Reagan's America. The president took 58.9% of the popular vote. Mr. Mondale took 40.9%. But the president's party, the Republicans, finished with 53 seats in the Senate, a net loss of 2. The Democrats have 47 seats in the Senate, a gain of 2. The Republicans are now expected to take 179 seats in the House of Representatives, a gain of just 13, compared with 166 seats last time. The Democrats are taking 256 compared with 269 last time, and they've kept their habitual majority. The Republicans have not controlled the House for 32 years. So we don't need a cut, or? Okay, thank you.
Seconds to us. Now.
The Republicans had expected to lose seats in the Senate, and they duly did. In Iowa, the Republican Senator Roger Jepsen failed to get a second term, beaten by Mr. Tom Harkin. Jepsen had tried to join a health spa that was shut down for prostitution. In Tennessee, the Democrat Mr. Albert Gore picked up the seat left by the former Republican leader, Senator Howard Baker. But in Kentucky, the Republican Mr. Mitch McConnell narrowly beat the Democrat Senator Walter Huddleston. One of the most ambitious Democrats and a likely presidential contender, Governor Mario Cuomo of New York, who wisely left the Democratic Party convention in July as quickly as he could, was asked by Carol Barnes why he thought President Reagan had won.
A lot of our arguments this time were more obscure. For example, he argues inflation, which is visible. We argue deficit, which is just as real, could be devastating, but it's not visible. It's the part of the iceberg that you don't see, and people wanted happy news. He talks about Grenada, which is people see as a great conquest. We talk about Lebanon, which is a little more subtle, harder to accept. People wanted happy news.
Will you be running for president next time round?
No, I run for governor in 1986 if if I announce for governor, which I expect to, I can't do that now, or otherwise all those people who were shouting who want me to get out, they'd have equal time. So I'll probably announce for governor in '86.
And not for president next time around?
I'll probably announce for governor in '86.
Thank you.
Sufficient unto the day of the problems thereof. St. Teresa.
So President Reagan has romped home despite the dislike of liberal intellectuals in both the United States and Britain. He is, very simply, very popular. He has also, for the past 2 years, run an economic recovery which has raised real wages and cut unemployment. But even a less popular Republican would probably have won, because the Republican Party has taken over the high-growth, new industry, south and west of the United States, the Sun Belt, the successful parts, where the population is moving and which are still non-unionized. The Democrats are stuck with the old, decaying industrial areas and with the least successful groups in American life. Mr. Mondale's best support came from the old, the over 65, the unskilled workers and the blacks. That's a political coalition that looks utterly ineffectual and out of date. Mr. Reagan has not changed. He stays good-humored, optimistic. Most Americans like and trust him. And he, in return, has given them back their lost self-confidence. Good morning from New York.